الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَسَأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And today, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, we are discussing one of the urgent topics for some of our imams. You can tell that, subhanallah, from the registration that we got, it's beyond our expectation. We just started marketing for this topic a few days ago, and mashallah, many imams have joined. Many imams has asked for the link and the recording after, inshallah, that or this workshop in, inshallah. Inshallah, I'm going to give a little bit or speak a little bit about NAIF. NAIF has started in 2002, I think. And during that time, it went ups and downs with many, mashallah, missions and visions for our imams. And 2 years ago, we had a group of imams, mashallah, they gathered and they wanted to do something new for our imams in regard to education, in regard to finance, in regard to supporting imams in everything they can, mashallah. The group started or came back with the leadership or chairman, Dr. Abdul Hakim Muhammad. He might join, inshallah, but he's in travel. And a staff, including Dr. Hafid Ikhlas with us now, Dr. Ahmed Al-Hattab, as we see, mashallah, with us now, brother Dr. Musa Azam, and Sheikh Rifat, the head of imams in Canada, and myself as a servant for all of those, mashallah. Also part of the leadership structure of NAIF, that we have regional directors who are monitoring the work of NAIF, including Sheikh Muhammad al-Mismari, Sheikh Abdul Hakim Muhammad, Dr. Abdul Rauf al-Khawalda, Dr. Abdul Hamid Samra, Dr. Akram Kassab, Dr. Ma'in al-Quda, Dr. Muhammad al-Qatanani, Dr. Irhabi, and Dr. Hafid Ikhlas, Sheikh Ahmed al-Hattab as well, Imam Abdul Rahman, Sheikh Abdul Rahman Patal, Sheikh Kifah al-Marhabi, Sheikh Rifat from Canada, Sheikh Rifat Muhammad, Sheikh Taha al-Hassani, and Sheikh Walid Basyuni, and Sheikh Zulfaqar Ali Shah. All of those, mashallah, they are our guide and giving us, mashallah, their advices whenever we need that. And they are also working on some projects. We have also some imams, not from the structure of NAIF, but they joined because mainly we are open for any discussions and open for any recommendations and advices. For example, a few weeks ago, we got an idea from one of our mashayikh, Sheikh Mustafa Rawash, and he's in Turkey now. Hope he joins, inshallah. He came up with an idea, why not we have an educational program for the kids or children of imams. And he joined the group. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Now we created a group for him. We formed the group, and he is in the group now. They are working on creating a curriculum and an educational program for our imams' children. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of those, Allahumma ameen, and bless our speaker today and all of our guests. With no further ado, inshallah, without any further ado, I'll hand this platform to Dr. Hafid Ikhlas to introduce the topic and introduce Dr. Hatem Al-Haj, whom I believe that he doesn't need any introduction from all of us. He's beyond this introduction. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Sheikh Hafid, go ahead, inshallah.
Yeah. Jazakumullah Shaykhina. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu ala Sayyid al-Anbiya wal-Mursaleen sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ala alihi wa ashabihi wa al-Bayt ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, this is, alhamdulillah, it's one of the monthly forum that we have for the imams, just to upgrade them on the comparative issue. For that, it is really my honor and pleasure to introduce, mashallah, today is a presenter whom We love all of us, alhamdulillah, need no introduction. But just as to fulfill the formality, Dr. Hatem was, mashallah, born in Cairo, in Egypt, mashallah, Dunya. And he has multi-talented. He has done his PhD in comparative fiqh from Al-Jinan University in Lebanon. And he is also, mashallah, and he has his master's also in this field. But most importantly, he has the other field also, which is, the medical. He has his bachelor's, mashallah, of medicine. And he has also graduated with honors from Alexandria University Medical School, Alexandria, Egypt. So he has the best of both worlds, mashallah. And from that, we have all have been benefiting from him, not only here, but worldwide, mashallah, people in different capacities. He's also part of AMJA, mashallah, which is, and he has many classes that he is offering, and I'm also one of his students without him knowing that I'm, mashallah, benefiting from him. And on Facebook, mashallah, his recent post about, Ibn Sina, what happened to him, mashallah, and these are he has been educating all of us. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to showering his blessings upon him, especially, and through him to all of us. And today's topic is very important about biosciences, because our imams, alhamdulillah, when we go to our seminaries and our universities, we are exposed to some of the content which is based on the religion, but the contemporary issue. Example, now people are asking this question, and these are, especially Muslims living in Muslim minority countries, where when we go even to renew our driver's license, whether can we donate our organs or not, organ donation. And some of our musallis, when they are in the hospital, what kind of scenarios that they're going through. So it will give us enough exposure today, inshallah, so that we know what is happening, inshallah. So this is the topic, and this is the philosophy behind of having these workshops, and even today's workshop, inshallah. So without any further ado, I would like to call upon our Sheikh Hatem Al-Haj, inshallah, to do the presentation. And definitely, inshallah, whichever way we all wanted to have, we can, if he is comfortable taking the question in between, otherwise, inshallah, we can write down our questions, and maybe we can respond to those question and answer session towards the end. And we can also, Sheikh Hatem, if I can request you to have a break, maybe in about 45 minutes or so, about 10 minutes break, so that people can go grab their cup of tea and coffee rather than just walking around. So inshallah, that way we will sit down and we will pay much attention, inshallah, once we know that they're going to be break coming up in about 45 minutes or 1 hour. So I leave it to you, inshallah, how you would like to conduct the presentation from here. So Sheikh Hatem Al-Haj, mashallah.
الله يبارك فيكم، جزاكم الله خيرا. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. To proceed. So I would like this to be in the form of a discussion, because we only have 15 participants, 16 participants. Even if we have 40 participants, you said 40 people registered, so they may join at some point. It's still possible to have this in the form of discussion. And we have our mashayikh here, and I said in the beginning that I'll be embarrassed to speak in the presence of Sheikhna Dr. Jamal Badawi, but we will try. Yet I would like to be corrected. I would like people to at least to interject with their comments and their corrections and their observations. And this will make it more interesting, because I am not a public speaker. I am like a very monotonous speaker. You will sleep, during my presentation if we don't make this a little bit more interactive. So the topics that I will talk about today, and certainly if we have the time to talk about all of them, and I want you also to direct me or redirect me if I go on tangents, because that's something I usually do. But there are certain interesting topics that we agreed we will talk about today. We will talk about the beginning of life, the end of life, and between the beginning and the end, we'll talk about some other issues like organ donation, like tadawi in general, or seeking medical treatment. and the cutting edge topics, if you're interested in some more cutting edge topics in medicine, such as cloning and things of that nature, stem cell research, all of those issues, then I would like you to bring them up, because certainly we can't talk about everything today, because the relationship between medicine and fiqh is very multifaceted, because medicine, the subject matter of medicine is the human body, which is tasked by the religious obligations, and the religious obligations are the subject matter of fiqh. So you could imagine that there would be a lot of sort of interfaces between fiqh and medicine, and fiqh provides us with a value, a legal value and an ethical value for every human action. So fiqh gets into everything, which is expected. Even the medical practice needs to be regulated by fiqh. And it is one of the other interfaces between fiqh and medicine, in which medicine depends on fiqh, is that because medicine tasks the body with religious obligations, or fiqh tasks or Allah tasks our body with religious obligations, and fiqh is the science that designates a value for every religious obligation. Fiqh depends on medicine in certain tasawwurat, or the conceptualization of the human body, the anatomy of the human body, the physiology of the human body, and so on. So you could certainly imagine that the rulings of al-mufattirat in Ramadan, or the things that will invalidate our fasting in Ramadan, the rulings will be very dependent on our understanding of the human body. And that's why our fuqaha disagreed over many things, because their conceptualization of the human anatomy was different, and they disagreed among themselves. There are many other issues: the short duration for menstruation, the long duration for menstruation or for pregnancy, and many other issues that in which fiqh needs medicine. And our critical and loving, basically, investigation of our legal heritage is important also, because there are many things that our fuqaha said. They did their best. We respect them. We love them for having done their best within basically the resources that were available to them. They asked the scientists, and they asked the physicians of their times, so they did not fall short in that regard. But the physicians of their times also did not have, the knowledge that we have now. I think our knowledge about the human body, and whether it's anatomy or physiology, is a little bit more mature now. Or to be honest, it's a lot more mature now than it was then. Therefore, we need to make sure that we are not simply cutting and pasting from our legal heritage, which is great. And the beautiful thing about our legal heritage is that the Ummah never agreed on a misguidance, or never agreed on something that was proven false. So we could always find, if we are flexible and we are not zealot, and that's what we hope we are, we could always find within our legal heritage something that is congruent with new facts or new discoveries about the human body. So, I know that the introduction may have a little bit longer than you needed, but I just wanted to say this because there will be many issues that we will discuss where things have changed a little bit from the way our fuqaha conceptualized them. The first thing that we want to talk about today is the beginning of life, which makes sense, the beginning, for the beginning. the talk. So the beginning of life. The beginning of life is a hotly debated issue nowadays. Why is that? Because our fuqaha, there is a particular hadith that's reported by Al-Bukhari and Muslim, a very authentic hadith that is reported in the authentic collections, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, إن خلق أحدكم يجمع في بطن أمه 40 يوما و40 ليلة ثم يكون علقة مثله ثم يكون مضغة مثله ثم يبعث إليه الملك فيؤذن بأربع كلمات فيكتب رزقه وأجله وعمله وشقي أم سعيد ثم ينفخ فيه الروح. So the translation of this would be that one of you would be gathered in the womb of his mother for 40 days and 40 nights, 40 days, and then he will be so that's the gathering. That's the phase of the nutfa. That's the phase of the sperm drop, the gathering still. And then he will be alaqa, which is the clinging clot, whatever it is that you're going to translate alaqa into. There are many translations, but clinging, something that's clinging, and they call it the clinging clot, because it attaches itself to the roof of the womb. And then will be a mudgha, which is a lump of flesh, or sometimes they said chewed flesh, or a lump of flesh anyway, a lump of flesh for a similar period. Then the angel will be sent, and the angel will be commanded regarding 4 things to write in the scrolls, 4 things. That would be rizqahu, his provisions or livelihood, ajalahu, his lifespan, amalahu, his deeds, wa shaqiyyun am sa'id, his felicity or damnation in the hereafter. And then he will breathe into him the soul. And then he will breathe the soul into it, the fetus. So this hadith was taken to heart by all of our scholars, and they should have, because it's hadith that's reported in the authentic collections. It's reported from a faqih, which is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, one of the greatest fuqaha of the Sahaba. And they took it to heart. So they said, okay, we have 40 days as a sperm drop, 40 days as a clinging clot, 40 days as a lump of flesh, and then the soul will be breathed into the fetus. That is 120 days. The soul will be breathed after 120 days into the fetus. Certainly our fuqaha, and we will come to later to talk about their disagreements in terms of the rulings of abortion, but this is where they were coming from. We have 40, 40, 40. So, the first 40 would be basically just the gathering, the sperm drop within the womb. And after 120, we have the ensoulment. They call this personhood. And in the secular tradition, the ensoulment is called personhood. We call it ensoulment because we believe in those metaphysical realities. So now this hadith, so it seems to, like, if you say to any embryologist or gynecologist that that this is basically these are the phases of human development in the first 120 days, they will have a little bit of difficulty with that. And the difficulty comes from the fact that we know that by about 56 days of gestational age, so that is, you want always to remove 14 days from the gestational age. Whenever the physician says 4 weeks, that means 2 weeks in our calculation. And keep that in mind, because that's always a source of confusion. Even some of the conferences in which there were discussions between the fuqaha and the doctors and so on, they were speaking different different languages, because the doctors usually use the gestational age. Gestational age starts from the first day of the last period. That is very precisely, most of the time, about 2 weeks before conception. So from our perspective, the rulings apply to the conception, not the gestational age. So post-conception for us is usually two weeks later than the gestational age, or 2 weeks earlier than the gestational age. So if the doctor says that the age of this fetus is 20 weeks, that's 18 for us. If the doctor says the age of the fetus is 14 weeks, that's 12 for us, because it's 12 post-conception. So, but at any rate, when we say that we have these 3 phases, each one will last 40 days, it is known that the first heartbeat takes place somewhere between 21 to 24 days post-conception, which would be, how many weeks is that? That is about 3 weeks post-conception. That's about 5 weeks of gestational age, but post-conception, it's about 3 weeks, 21 to 24 days, when the heart starts to beat. So by 56 days, you have a complete fetus that is simply growing from here on. But you have all the organs, and you have a complete fetus that is just growing from there onwards. So we have to address this fact, and we have to say that it seems that the fuqaha's understanding of embryology was not perfect, because they talk about this. They talk about the embryology in their discussion of abortion. And now, to exonerate the Sharia, it is important. That's what we want to do. We want to exonerate the Sharia without impugning the tradition. So we have to say that the tradition itself was not basically unanimous on some of these issues. And the Sharia is clear from clear of any misunderstanding that took place after the revelation was completed. If you, the reason why this is quite clear to me is because the very hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud has another narration in which the wording, this other narration is in Muslim, and Muslim was more particular about wording than al-Bukhari and than other, rawah or collectors of the hadith. So the narration in Muslim says that, إن خلق أحدكم يجمع في بطن أمه 40 يوما و40 ليلة ثم يكون علقة في ذلك مثل ذلك. And then it will be علقة in that. In that refers to what? What was the last thing that was mentioned? The last thing that was mentioned is not the womb, it's the 40 days. So in that refers to the 40 days. And this is not something that we are saying now because we just are too embarrassed, so we're trying to make things up. Ibn al-Zamlakani, rahimahullah ta'ala, is a 7th to 8th century scholar, and he had this understanding that everything is happening in the first 40 days, not the 120 days, the first 40 days. How did he arrive at that without the sort of the scientific developments that we have now? He said that the hadith of Hudhayfa radiallahu anhu indicates that. The hadith of Hudhayfa talks about, you know, إذا مر بالنطفة 42 ليلة, if when 42 days pass by the sperm drop inside the womb, the angel will be sent to it to basically make its form. فصورها وخلق سمعها وبصرها وجلدها وعظمها. So it will basically form it, create its form or make its form, and its hearing and vision and skin and bones and so on. And then the angel will breathe it also said in this hadith that the angel will breathe the soul into it. So Ibn Zamlakani said if everything happens in the first 40 days. We could also say that the 3 phases don't have basically to take up the 40 days. Everything is happening within the 40 days. That does not necessarily mean they take up all the 40 days. So they could finish all of them earlier within the first 40 days. If you go to, if you want to confirm that, so these are 2 hadith here. If you want to confirm that, you refer to a higher authority, the Quran. In Surah Al-Mu'minun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, ثُمَّ خَلَقْنَا النُّطْفَةَ عَلَقَةً فَخَلَقْنَا الْعَلَقَةَ مُضْغَةً فَخَلَقْنَا الْمُضْغَةَ عِظَامًا فَكَسَوْنَا الْعِظَامَ لَحْمًا ثُمَّ أَنشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. So then we created, so after Allah spoke about creating us from mud and putting us in a safe lodge, then we've created the mudgha, or we made the nutfa into a alaqa and the alaqa into a mudgha. So now here is the mudgha, the flesh, the lump of flesh. And then Allah says, فَخَلَقْنَا الْمُضْغَةَ عِظَامًا. So al-mudgha comes before the izam, because some people can test our understanding of the mudgha, and some people can say, whoever told you that the mudgha is a lump of flesh, the mudgha maybe the fetus is with all 4 limbs and eyes and everything is still being called mudgha by the Prophet ﷺ between 80 and 120 days post-conception, which doesn't basically agree or does not conform with the Quranic description of the phases of creation, because Allah clearly says that the mudgha will be turned into bones and the bones will be covered with flesh. Then ثُمَّ أَنشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ, and keep in mind that ثُمَّ indicates succession with delay. ثُمَّ indicates succession with delay, which is different from fa, which does not basically infer that delay, but the immediate succession. But ثُمَّ infers succession with delay. ثُمَّ أَنشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ, then we made him into a new creation or a different creation. And Ali radiallahu anhu said that meant breathed the soul into it, or into the fetus. So the soul would be breathed into the fetus, not after the mudgha or the phase of the mudgha, but there are 2 phases that are being mentioned in the Quran, 2 phases that are being mentioned in the Quran between the mudgha and the ensoulment, the mudgha and the ensoulment, that we have to account for. And then the ensoulment happens بالتراخي, after a period of time, because Allah used thumma and not fa here, which indicates succession with delay. So what does that mean? It means, and this is my own understanding, and I could be very wrong. It's very possible, I'm often wrong, but this is my understanding. My understanding is that we can keep our consensus regarding the 120 days and the installment, and basically with our new understanding of embryology, we can correct the sort of whatever it is that is mentioned about the genesis of the fetus in our legal heritage and keep the installment at 120 days because of the weight of consensus, even though it is not substantiated by the text in this case, because our understanding of the text of Revelation is different. But the text of Revelation itself is not saying that installment happens after the mudghah, which we don't know when the phase of the mudghah ends. It says that it happens after the bones have been covered with flesh and with some delay. So why am I trying to force this consensus when it is unfounded on any text of Revelation, as I understand the text of Revelation, in terms of the different narrations of the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, combined with the hadith of Hudhayfa, in light of the ayat in Surah Al-Mu'minun. Because the consensus, even if it is not supported by text, and that's a matter of the disagreement on usul al-fiqh, but the consensus, even if it's not supported by evidence, does have a weight. It does not have the weight of a definitive proof, qat'i, dalil qat'i, but it is called dalil dhanni, which is a speculative proof. So unless we come up with a better proof, it will stand until we come up with a better proof. Consensus is a very complicated issue. And I am, I'm not one of the people who basically exaggerate in the weight of consensus, unless it is a true consensus, because most of the consensuses that have been reported in our legal heritage are not verifiable consensuses. Most of them, and all of the scholars know this. And at best, they are ijma' sukuti, which is tacit consensus. And tacit consensus does not enjoy the same weight of like a verbal, clear, explicit consensus. At best, it would be dalil dhanni or a speculative proof. So why am I trying to save that consensus, the 120 days? Because it seems that many people reported it. And I'm not saying here that that the Ummah is guided by the Holy Spirit in this regard, like in the Christian understanding. But even though there is some disconnect between that consensus and what we have in the Revelation does not precisely tell us when will installment take place. So we don't have anything to go by in terms of installment. When does installment take place? Because there is this disagreement. If you say Hadith Hudhayfa is clearer, 42 days, I will tell you Surah Al-Mu'minun disagrees with Hadith Hudhayfa, because Surah Al-Mu'minun has two phases after the mudghah, before installment or personhood. So when is it that personhood takes place in the secular tradition? So if you're completely secular and you want to discuss the concept of personhood and you don't believe in installment to begin with, when does personhood take place in the secular tradition? It could take place at fertilization to some of them. So when fertilization takes place, when the sperm goes into the ovum and fertilizes the ovum, that's it. For some, okay. It could, for others, it's implantation. which happens somewhere around 1 week after fertilization. For others, it's when it stops dividing, so there is no chance of twinning, because that would indicate the, because if there is still a chance of being twins or the cell dividing, that's not personhood to them. For others, it's with the first heartbeat, 21 to 24 days post-conception. But for others, it is with the first voluntary movement. And keep in mind, the first voluntary movement is different from the first reflexive movement. First reflexive movement happens early, but the first voluntary movement happens around 120 days post-conception. That's the first voluntary movement. And if you ask pregnant women, when do you feel a lot of movements, they will tell you the 5th month is when they feel a lot of movements. Immediately after that, the thalamus starts to form. And that is the part of the brain that is in charge of complex thought. So we do have, within the secular tradition, we do have, or within the scientific tradition, maybe we can say, we do have some grounds for adhering to the 120 days in terms of ensoulment. And we don't have anything better in the tradition. And the revelation is not giving us a precise date. So we're left with the revelation not giving us a precise date. The tradition is giving us the 120, and they're claiming a consensus. Science is not being decisive, and you have different events that take place in fetal life, and people disagree which event indicates personhood, which is ensoulment for us. What does that mean? It means some more lenience and flexibility when it comes to the rulings of abortion. It means some more lenience and flexibility when it comes to the rulings of abortion. Our fuqaha, because they didn't have this understanding, maybe because they didn't have this understanding for whatever reason, but our fuqaha had a lot of disagreement over the ruling of abortion. If we start from the Hanafi position, and people will disagree over this all the time because they're, inside every madhab, there are disagreements. They have certain protocols to follow to identify the authorized or the mu'tamad position inside every madhab. And so when I say that the Hanafis say it's permissible, abortion is permissible until 120 days, I am using Ibn al-Humam's opinion or tarjih, and I'm using Ibn Abidin's tarjih in this regard. Ibn Abidin goes as far as saying that this is permissible even without the permission of the husband, or even without consulting the husband. This is basically the woman's decision for up to 120 days. Now, Ibn Abdin says that Ibn Wahban said that this cannot be true. Like, there has to be a reason. This can only be true for a need. That is fine. I can see that, because it is not really congruent with the Sharia's objective or objectives to abort a 100-day-old fetus without a need, just to abort it, just because you're not in the mood to be a mother or something. It wouldn't make sense to our Shara'i zawq or taste, basically. So I can understand that. But then if you come later and try to qualify the need, so some of the Hanafis did not qualify the permissibility. Some qualified it with the need, but they did not qualify the need. And if you try to basically force on them your qualification of the need, you just say that I disagree with the Hanafis, and that's fine, but be honest. That's fine, that's absolutely fine. You know, because I will tell you about the Maliki position now, which will be completely different. Say I take the Maliki position, but don't basically read your biases into the Hanafi madhab. Just say I disagree, that's it. So we have then, of course, we have some Hanafis who made that analogy between, you know, the muhrim breaking the eggs of the, you know, I think all of us are imams, so I don't need to translate everything, I believe. So they make this analogy between the muhrim breaking the eggs of the haram, and they say that if the muhrim breaks the eggs of the haram, he's liable because that's the origin of the bird or the game birds of the haram. And if that is the case, then aborting the fetus, which is the origin of the human, should also be a liability. So some Hanafis say that, and you know, some Shafi'is say that. Imam al-Ghazali said that, despite the fact that the Shafi'i position is different, but there is intra-madhhabi differences. So for the Malikis, they say that you can't expel the semen once it gets inside. So they are strict to that extent in this regard. So for the Malikis, you cannot even expel the semen once it gets inside. And for some Malikis, you cannot drink medicine that will lessen your progeny, Al-Imam Al-Lakhmi of the Malikis disagreed, and he was more inclined towards the position that will be the authorized Hanbali position, which is the permissibility in the first 40 days, because that is the period of the nutfa or the sperm drop to them. Then the Shafi'is would concur with the Hanafis on the permissibility in the first 120 days. Someone will say, you know, are you more Shafi'i than Imam al-Ghazali, who said that it's not permissible at any time, and he gave the analogy of Bayt al-Haram? No, of course not. But again, Imam al-Ramli and the other, Dimyati and others, who would basically look at the difference in opinion between the earlier scholars of the madhab and favor some over others, they said that our madhab is still the permissibility in the first 120 days, despite Imam al-Ghazali's disagreement. They do say that. So then we come to the Hanbali position, which seems to be the most popular position nowadays among the contemporary scholars. In the authorized Hanbali position, they say it's permissible in the first 40 days. Okay, synthesis is extremely important, right? Because analysis is important, but synthesis is more important than analysis. And then nowadays they say application is more important than synthesis. But anyway, but synthesis is important. Our contemporary scholars, how did they synthesize all of this and the disagreements of the earlier scholars and the developments in science and embryology and so on? It seems that, you know, and I'm trying to be brief here because we can talk about this for hours, but it seems that our contemporary scholars are inclined to allowing abortion for a reason, for some reason, unqualified reason that the parents have in the first 40 days. So mutual agreement between the two parents in the first 40 days, and they have a reason, but they were not particularly strict about qualifying the reason. They said a need, haja, reason, the parents have their reason. Of course, there will be many scholars, contemporary scholars, who say no to it from day one. I'm just saying that it seems that the majority are more inclined to allowing it, permitting it in the first 40 days. Between 40 and 120, and this is the position of the Majma of Rabitat al-Alam al-Islami, Muslim Worldly, or what is it? Yeah, I guess. World Muslim League. So Rabitat al-Alam al-Islami, their Majma, which is the Majma of Mecca, their Majma said for the first 40 days for a need, between 40 and 120 days, it would be permissible if there are basically deformities in the fetus that would preclude the child from having a normal, dignified life. And they said, تصير حياته آلاما عليه وعلى أهله. And if his haya will become just a source of pain for him and his family, then it would be permissible between 40 to 120 days. Now, all of them will say it is impermissible after 120 days, with one exception. And this one exception is not even a matter of agreement, but it is the stronger opinion. And to me, it is clearly the correct opinion, that if the mother's life is in danger, it would be permissible at any time, because you don't sacrifice the root for the branch. You sacrifice the branch for the root. And she is the asl of that fetus. So in summary, that is that's the current basically trend within the scholarly community regarding abortion, and that's the background of that trend. I don't know if you want me to stop. Just Sheikh Ahmad, want me? Yes.
Shaykhana, Jazakumullah khairan for this explanation. I might request you, inshallah, to give a summary of everything we have talked from a fiqh perspective now, because we discovered that, mashallah, we have also some doctors joined the Zoom meeting here. So maybe we give them what is needed for them. And maybe before we speak here, if any doctor have any specific question or any imam have a specific question before Dr. Hatem goes with the summary for this specific point about the beginning of life or the abortion issue, which a lot of imams get asked, subhanAllah. I myself, like in a small community, I've been asked about this maybe 2-3 times. Especially with the legal laws that goes ups and downs in regard to that, and some states that they issue something against or in support to that issue. So if there is anyone now, we will give maybe 5 seconds.
Sheikh Ahmad, let me suggest, because it is very hard for me, like brevity is not one of my skills. So let me suggest to make this in the form of questions and answers. Yeah. So that people get what they came here to hear, I guess, or to listen to.
So everyone, alhamdulillah, he got the points and he got this explanation in mind. Or anyone need an explanation? Anyone need any answers for his question? So
Assalamualaikum, Sheikh.
Walaikum assalam, guys.
Dr.
Yeah, Assalamualaikum. I'm a family physician calling from London. I just wanted to ask you to say a few words about a common question I get from my patients, which is about in the UK, we routinely screen for Down syndrome. And this is ideally done before the gestational age of about 3 months, but sometimes it can be delayed for various reasons, and it can happen, a few weeks after this point as well. And then the patient is given a risk of the child having Downs. And usually if it's more than 1% in the UK, we recommend, medically, the doctors might recommend an abortion. I was just wondering if you could say a few words about that, please, from an Islamic perspective. Jazakallah.
Okay, this is an extremely difficult question, extremely difficult. And I have been toiling with this question for years. Okay. The idea here is when you say that it is permissible, it actually hurts people who have kids with Down syndrome. It makes them feel like you're saying that their kid's life is not valuable. The idea here is I always refrain from making that determination for the parents. We should leave some room for people to make up their mind or to make their decisions. There is like a statement from Imam Taymiyyah rahimahullah that I like a lot about the role of ilham, which is divine inspiration. That's not divine revelation. That's just the sort of divine inspiration, divine tawfiq, guidance, something of that nature. That the ilham has a role not only for the mufti عند تكافؤ الأدلة, or when he has like sort of equal proofs on both sides of the argument, or when the mufti is having difficulty sort of favoring one argument over another, but also when the muftis disagree, and the mustafti then wants to favor one position over another, I would say I would leave it to the mustafti's inclinations. Certainly Imam Ibn Taymiyyah said, مع خشية الله وعمارة قلبه بالتقوى وبعد النظر والتحري. So he put all of the, basically the guardrails to prevent us from abusing this concept. You need to have asked, you need to have done your best in investigating, but you have legitimate muftis with legitimate positions, substantiated by some proofs of the Sharia, giving you different conclusions. Then there is time for the individual who's asking, to whom this fatwa will apply. There is time for them basically to factor in their value system, their individual circumstances, their individual inclinations, and seek Allah's guidance, pray istikhara, seek Allah's guidance, and so on, and make the determination between them, the mom and the dad. They need to make that determination. But I will refrain from saying anything more than this, I guess. I am telling you that between 40 to 120 days, there is room. And according to many of the contemporary scholars, this permissibility will apply to the case where a medical condition has been diagnosed and is expected to make the life of the person difficult and a cause of pain for them and for their family. How will the sort of individuals apply this to their own circumstances and scenarios? I would leave it to them. Dr. Farzana, I hope that this answer was satisfactory. I understand that it may not be, but please understand my hesitation here.
No, Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh. I fully understand. And as you said, that is my practice actually, to advise my patients exactly as you said, to do istikhara and seek the opinions of their sheikh or whoever is their spiritual guidance. But then ultimately it's their decision after they've sought istikhara, etc., and taken the relevant steps. So this is what I usually advise if they ask me. And also just want to say that sometimes, we are not always right. Doctors can't necessarily know everything. And I've seen cases where women have come back with perfectly normal, healthy babies where they've decided to go ahead with a pregnancy. And alhamdulillah, the child was not affected with Downs. And they've come in to show me and tell me, alhamdulillah, that they're pleased with the decision and the discussions that we had. So Jazakallah, thank you. I understand it's a difficult area.
Allah barik feek.
Jazakumullah khairan all. Dr. Hatem, do you suggest that we go with the second point here, which is actually the organ and blood donation?
I would like you basically to drive, just sit in the driver's seat and just let me know what I should do.
No, inshallah. You're the leader here, mashallah.
No, please. It's much easier for me. I don't like it. It will be much easier for me. You will take that burden off of my shoulders.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I think that the beginning of the hayat is covered. May Allah bless you, Shaykhuna. Yeah, we go to then inshallah next topic now, and then we see inshallah if there's any interest, because we don't see any question. I also requested people to post their questions, concerns, and comments if they have any. So we are very grateful to Dr. Farzana, mashallah, Sister Farzana, joining us all the way from UK and raising this question, which is very valid. And as you said, it's very difficult. But alhamdulillah, I think probably this is what we get the idea. How should we proceed, inshallah, from here to the next topic, inshallah.
Sure. So what's the next topic, Sheikh Ahmed?
As mentioned actually on the flyer, that the organ and blood donation and transplantation.
Okay, so organ donation, transplantation will be just one topic, and the blood donation is under the same topic, but
like a branch
in general. So organ donation, organ transplantation, including blood. So, okay, to be brief, so that we can cover more subjects. To be brief, the majority of Muslim scholars, and there have been declarations from different majama. The majma in India was the strictest majma in this regard, and I do have many Hanafi scholars basically replying with their own contentions against the decisions made by the majma in India, but in general among the majama, some will be stricter and some will be sort of more lenient, and we don't always have to think that the more lenient is better, or more knowledgeable or greater. We would like to make things easy for people, but again, at the same time, we want to allow a free discourse so that the pressure is not placed on the muftin to always say it's halal, it's halal, it's halal, it's halal. But the trend among most of the scholars is the permissibility of organ donation and organ transplantation with certain exceptions and certain conditions. What are the exceptions? The exceptions for the scholars are basically to transfer the organs that transfer the genetic code. These would be testicles and ovaries. These will not be permissible to donate or to transplant. The other exception for the scholars would be, and this is like this is something that some of the scholars talked about. It is hypothetical, it's futuristic, the brain, because it basically, they had some disagreement over brain transplantation, which is not a reality yet, but just in case in the future, that's an area where some of the scholars talked about, and they think that this would be an exception. But the exceptions that have been addressed are the organs that would transfer the genetic code, and they talked about al-awra al-mughallaza, which is basically the external genitals. For some reason, but anyway, that's the position of Majma of Jeddah, which is the biggest Majma, the International Islamic Fiqh Academy. So I would not disagree with them. It's a large group of senior scholars, and but anyway, it's clear to me the impermissibility of transplant of the ovaries and testicles is clearer to me, I should say that, than the external genitalia. So these are the exceptions. What are the conditions? The conditions are the presence of a need for organ transplantation. If other medical interventions would result in satisfactory outcome, comparable outcome, then other medical interventions would be favored, which is understandable. That's even understandable from a medical perspective. The second condition is that it would not cause greater harm than the benefit accrued, which is also understandable because الضرر لا يدفع بضرر أشد منه أو مثله. So harm should not be averted by harm that is greater or equal, because that would be, not conducive to any benefit. So if the person that will donate the organ will not, certainly there will be harm in some harm, but this harm is not life-altering harm. The harm here is that when you donate your kidney, there will be surgery. They will open you up. They'll get your kidney out, and there is a possibility that you may suffer some consequences. That is why, based on the concept of harm and making it a condition, I would suggest that people younger than 40 years of age should not donate their kidneys, because if life expectancy, like here in America, would be around 80 years, within the 40 years, you will need every nephron that you have donated, basically to keep you healthy and to keep you from having hypertension and kidney failure and so on. So people who, like if you donate at age 20, your other kidney may get exhausted by age 60, and you may start to suffer complications. So it would be preferred that younger people less than 40 would not donate their kidneys, for instance. So these are the conditions and these are the exceptions. Otherwise, organ donation would be permissible. It would be permissible whether the recipient is Muslim or not, because في كل ذات كبد رطبة صدقة, so every act of benevolence you will be rewarded for. It will be considered charitable act of benevolence towards any living being, any living entity, any being with a moist liver, any living entity. You will be rewarded for this. Donation of blood would be considered certainly permissible. If organ donation is permissible, donation of blood would be permissible. But when it comes to blood, because that's, the other condition the scholars laid down also that I forgot to mention is that this would be a donation, not a sale. There is like some disagreement nowadays between, some disagreement regarding a compensation for blood. Certainly blood is najis, and it is haram for us to sell anything that is najis. But some people are contending that, the people who donate blood for income, these are poor people, and so on and so forth, and you know, the effort and the time, and et cetera, et cetera. But you know, the standard fatwa is still, the fatwa of the majority, the standard fatwa is still, organ donation is only permissible if it is a benevolent act, not a transaction or a profit-seeking transaction. And that includes donation of blood. That's it.
So transplanting an organ, we spoke about the donation concept now, but what about someone is already like they got this organ from a person that he's already dying or from an accident? Sheikhna, the same rules apply to that, right?
Yes, of course. So so if someone dies, organ donation from a living person to another living person is what we have discussed. If someone dies and they had left, and that's what the Majma in India does not accept. The Majma in India does not accept that they do not consider this wasiyah or this will to be a valid one. But the majority of the scholars have allowed this. If in their wasiyah they allowed basically the harvesting of their organs, or that's the medical term that we use, maybe a little curt, but if they allowed the harvesting of their organs for the purpose of transplantation, then that would be okay. If their awliya allowed it after their death, that would still also be okay. So it's either them allowing them before their death in their wasiyah, or their awliya allowing it after their death. In these two cases, it would be allowed to transfer from that's the cadaveric or the organ transplantation.
Yes, Allah understand.
Yes.
Okay. And any question, Mashaykhna or doctors? You can write your questions also in the chat part. So, all right. Would you like to move on, or we take a little break?
As you like.
Sheikh Ikhlas.
No, I guess we could just give 5 minutes break, inshallah, and then we'll be right back. I have received, oh my God, Sheikh Ibrahim. Assalamu alaikum, mashallah. We have a question from Atlanta, Georgia, with Sheikh Ibrahim Qadir, who was Imam here with the masjid also. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So he asked about, I think probably we can discuss this question, and then we can take a 5 minutes break, and then inshallah we come back and we move on to the next topic. He says that the post-death donation apply equally between Darul Harab and Darul Islam or Darul Salam.
Yes, yes. As I said, the donation to anyone, Muslim or a non-Muslim, is a charitable act, and a charitable act, you know, every human being is basically a deserving recipient for a charitable act. There is nothing in the Sharia that would prevent donation to another human being. In terms of Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam, the classification of the abodes to the abode of Islam and the abode of war is a classification that was basically descriptive, not prescriptive, I may say, which means that the fuqaha made this classification to describe the reality in their times. But it's not limited to this, because there is Dar al-Ahd, which is the abode of treaty, for instance. It is also preferred, and that's my, that's my inclination, that we have the abode of security, Dar al-Amn, abode of security, not necessarily Dar al-Ahd, because Dar al-Ahd, that is the perspective of the Muslim state. But what is my perspective as an American citizen? You know, I'm not in a treaty with America. You know, it is for me the abode of security, the abode of safety. So it is where I can practice my deen freely, and I am not basically coerced to change it or to denounce it, disavow it. So I think it's the abode of security. And so in this case, donating your organ to a combatant, I would not suggest that you do. But it's quite obvious. But if I am here in America, and this is the abode of safety, the abode of security, and I'm an American citizen, and we were just talking about this issue, you know, the Pledge of Allegiance, for instance. This is a question that we just got. The Pledge of Allegiance. Kids, you know, some of our kids get beaten because they don't, in some schools where they still have the Pledge of Allegiance, if a kid does not stand up for that, they can be harmed. So what you can say to them is basically استحضر معاني صالحة للوطنية. You know, there is no problem in basically thinking of wholesome meanings of nationality, you know, like as an extension of neighborliness. We are commanded to be neighborly, and that goes out in circles. So the nation is basically the wider circle of this concept. So think about something that is wholesome while still believing that your ultimate loyalty is to God and no one. And that is, you know, that's not even contestable by most of the Christians in this country, that your ultimate loyalty is to God, because God is the ultimate goodness. And basically, it's not, you know, when your ultimate loyalty is to God, that's not rearranging your prejudices. But you are basically initiating your prejudices, and you are making an ultimate loyalty to the ultimate goodness. Anyway, so it's the abode of in the abode of security, there is no problem in donating your organs to any person, whether it's Muslim or non-Muslim. Every human being is a deserving recipient of your benevolence and charity.
I'll rephrase what we got here on the chat, like saying, what if a person or a donor started to doubt about the destination of his organ, like he started to doubt that maybe this blood or this organ is going, like for example, they asked for just the blood, and his intention is to give it to civilians or to people in this area, and he doesn't know where this blood going to be, or he doubt, or he's not sure about this organization or this hospital that taking the medicine. Because we got a question here saying, I think my main concern is that the donation cannot be designated post-death, and there is a chance that the waiting list could promote giving the organ to military personnel or whoever.
What if someone is not comfortable with a particular, you know, act, or it's not, you know, no one is required to do this.
So up to you as a donor. Yeah.
Yes, it's up to you as a donor. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Alhamdulillah. Any other questions, brothers? Dear Mashayikh. Jazakum Allahu khairan. Any comments from Dr. Jamal for us?
Any corrections?
If you don't mind, Sheikhna, unmute yourself. شيخنا شيخنا ممكن تعمل مايكروفون لأنه مش مفتوح. دكتور جمال.
أظن الشيخ started his 5-minute break.
Yeah, I think.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. We hear you, Sheikhna.
Okay. One practical issue, I experienced that myself many, many years ago. I don't know whether we're 30 or 40 when you come to that level. It's very difficult to remember everything. But I was visiting some Muslim country that has a large or substantial number of Muslims. And I would not designate where. I don't want to embarrass anyone. But when the issue of transplant was raised, one mufti said basically that it is not permissible to donate organs to a non-Muslim. All right. Dr. Hatem, mashallah, covered that both from the Sharia and, practical perspective. But what happened is that other groups also said that since Muslims are not going to donate to us, we decided also not to donate to Muslims. And of course, the central question here, again, that's up to experts like Dr. Hatem to explain, that the matchability is very important, avoiding rejection. So the larger the pool of donors, the more possibility of non-rejection. So that's necessary. I mean, that's a practical issue here. We want to treat people as we want them to treat us.
Yeah. Good point, Sheikhna. Jazakumullah khairan. And that opens actually also the gate for our imams about the source of fatwa. So, Dr. Hatem.
About the source of fatwa, you want to?
And the point that Dr. Jamal was talking about now is about some fatwa just to come from some muftis that as a Muslim you cannot, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Jamal, that Muslims cannot donate their organs to non-Muslims. Am I right?
Yeah, and the question of donating organs, there are scholars who said that you can't donate to anyone. There are many scholars who said that you cannot donate to anyone. But the issue of not donating to a Muslim, I just wonder why. I did talk about the combatant because you're not trying, like it would make sense. If someone is combatant, it would make sense. But aside from that, I don't know what is the legal basis or ratio leaders, the legal basis for such a position, because I don't seem like to find it. Sadaqah, charity, it's a charitable act. It's a benevolent act. It's a charitable act. Are non-Muslims basically recipients of your charitable act or benevolent act? Yes, of course, you could give sadaqah to non-Muslims. Now, the question of zakah is a different question, because zakah it's an obligation, and it's an obligation to. But keep in mind that those whose hearts are to be reconciled are non-Muslim. According to the Malikis and Hanbalis, at least, that this is still applicable, and it's applicable to non-Muslims, at least according to the Malikis and Hanbalis. But what I wanted to say is, where is it that sadaqah, that is not the zakah, sadaqah, is not permitted? And exactly. Isn't organ donation a form of charitable, benevolent behavior, a form of sadaqah? It is. So sadaqah and hadiyah are both permitted to Muslims and non-Muslims, and the same applies here. So and certainly I agree with what Sheikhna Dr. Jamal said. Yeah.
Allah musta'an. And for that, just I wanted to indicate, and it's not the topic for today, that when we get the fatwa for some our mashayikh, and that they just deliver the fatwa, they have to seek the source that he's issuing the fatwa, because mainly the source of the fatwa is very important. As we have seen Dr. Hatem and Shaykhana Dr. Hatem now, since he started from the beginning to the end, he relied everything on the sources and reasoning of his fatwa, and in regard to the topics that we talk, either about the beginning of life and abortion issues, or about the transplantation issue. Inshallah, next topic is going to be about the cosmetic surgeries and issues that you brothers, inshallah, concerned about Ramadan, or medical issue in regard to Ramadan. But may we take, inshallah, a short break of 5 minutes. You go, you grab your coffee, and come back in exactly 5 minutes. So it's now 12:30. We're going to restart and resume, inshallah, on 12:35. Align that timing with your own time zone, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. So, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف رسول الله. Welcome back. I hope that before we start, I would love to just say, I hope that you forgive my hesitant just to hosting one of my teachers, Sheikh Hatem, and some of our mashayikh like Dr. Jamal. So this is something has to happen. Inshallah, we're going to resume speaking and continue talking about what we're covering from the contemporary medical issues that faces us as imams when it comes to people or our communities asking about. We have covered from a medical and fiqh perspective the issue of the beginning of life, specifically speaking about the abortion issues, and also life support, I think, Sheikhna.
Life support, we haven't covered it yet in terms of the end of life.
Maybe we cover it at the end, inshallah. So we started with the beginning of life, and we end with the end of life as well. We also spoke about, or we covered the issue of blood donation, transplantation, and organ donation. Now, inshallah, maybe we start speaking about the women question that we always get asked, the cosmetic, and also for our brothers that they have maybe I don't know if it's right or wrong to say defects. My sheikh can correct me if I'm right or wrong. When they ask about cosmetic surgeries. So, Sheikhna.
Alhamdulillah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, cosmetic surgery in general is also a debated issue, and certainly it's a source of controversy. We have to agree on a first premise, which is that kullu khalqillahi hasan. All of Allah, of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beautiful. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this when someone had a deformity in his legs, and the hadith of Isbal, and he had like a longer garment, and he told him, lift up your garment. He said, I have a defect in my legs. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, kullu khalqillahi hasan. So this is something that we really have to emphasize, that all of the creation of Allah is beautiful, and we have to emphasize the importance of having this gratefulness for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for having created us in ahsan taqweem, or in the best mold, in the best shape as human beings. And despite the differences in our creation, where we have been all as humans created in the best shape. So alhamdulillah. Now, that does not mean that sometimes there are basically what you call deformities that are either acquired or congenital. So some people are born with certain deformities that is by being outside of the normal spectrum of human variation. So there is a spectrum of human variation. If you're outside of that normal spectrum of human variation, that would be called a deformity. Allah created, as-sihha wal-marad, health and sickness, and the deformities is part of his scheme, part of his plan is to bring that to the world as well. It's dar ibtila, it's an abode of testing, and he created life and death to test this. It's a trial. So that has to be understood as well. And in this sense, they agreed that cosmetic surgery I would not say they agreed, because there are always people who disagree. We're talking about the vast majority of scholars allowed cosmetic surgery to fix a deformity, whether it's acquired or congenital, So someone who has a sixth digit, can they remove the sixth digit? Yes, we would say that this is outside of the normal spectrum of human variation. Now, the issue that would be more controversial is if you are within the sort of the spectrum, normal spectrum, but you have something that they call it damama, something that is considered ugly, for instance. Would you be able to fix that, or would you be able to improve that through surgery? And that's controversial. In the Majma' al-Fiqh of the Muslim World League, in 1988, they addressed this issue. As far as I remember, it was 1988 or something. I think 1988. So they addressed this issue, and they said that if there is basically damama that is causing you physical or psychological suffering, and knowing the way things are in Majama', there must have been a couple of very active scholars that were really pushing that psychological sort of addition to the phrasing of the declaration or the decision. But at any rate, that went through in Majma', and so they vote, and it's so the majority position was to accept psychological suffering as a form of suffering. So in this case, if there is like some ugliness to that is causing the person to suffer psychologically, then it would be permissible to improve that or to enhance the shape of that organ. But again, we have to be very clear on discouraging this. We have to be very clear on discouraging this if it does not fall outside of the normal spectrum of human variation, because it's ungrateful, and it at the same time also the once you open the door for this, you can't close it. It's just then all of us will have to go through cosmetic surgery, and that would be the dream of the community of plastic surgeons. And technology will improve, and the surgery will be better and better and easier. So the dream of the community of plastic surgeon is that everybody, gets that sort of obsession about their ear or their nose, or like anything that they see to be suboptimal or not as beautiful as they want. So it has to be discouraged.
Yeah, most of the questions actually come from a psychological perspective, like they are not happy about what they are, and for that we have, for example, Sheikh Munib now, he just asked, hair transplant would be strongly discouraged, correct, or does it go with the same ruling here?
Well, no, I think hair transplant would be, I would be more lenient with hair transplant, because you are born with a full set of hair. You lose it. So, you know, to basically get it back is not necessarily changing your form. It is addressing one of the, it is basically addressing one of the natural developments or natural consequences of old age. But so it is not as, you know, fixing your nose because you're just not quite happy with the bridge of your nose or something like this, despite it being well within the normal range.
With the normal range.
Yeah.
Jazakumullah khairan, Doctor, for covering this.
But again, at the same time, I would not be, you know, I mentioned the position of the scholars and the position of the Majma to say that there is still room for people who truly psychologically suffering to have that surgery done.
Okay, so psychologically is taken care of, is also taken into consideration in this point.
What's that? Psychological, yes, the psychological factor is. Yeah.
We have a question. Do we have questions?
Yes, sir.
Brother Munib.
Assalamu alaikum. For the brother that, like, I'm just asking because one of the community members, they're trying to get married and they lost a lot of their hair because of the genetics in their families. So they're about 25 to 27 years of age, and they say, I cannot get married because I'm losing this hair. Is this an acceptable reason to go get a hair transplant? And so I said,
yes, it is an acceptable reason. It is an acceptable reason, even without the marriage issue. I think hair transplant is not a big deal because it's basically regaining something that you lost.
Okay, shukran.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Sheikhuna, there are, because since we are on this topic of hair transplant, we also been asked a couple of times, there are different options available, you know, using your own hair and then transplant them, or injecting it, or using, so what methodology or which areas, you know, that we can say that, okay, this is permissible and this is not, or in general, everything is fine?
To use somebody else's natural hair would be problematic, because that would fall under the wasl, which is to extend your hair with somebody else's hair, but it's still controversial whether it falls under wasl or not, because with wasl you're extending your hair. Yet it, according to the majority, that falls under wasl, or extending your hair with other hair. And if it is the natural hair of someone else, then the majority seem to forbid this. But there are other techniques that they have where you could use your own hair. Yes.
I think there are multiple ways now, and the rule is general for all of them, except for the wasl, like what you said now, Sheikh.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, inshallah, we move on. Inshallah, the medical guidelines related to fasting.
Okay, so Fasting here is one of the areas where you need medicine. Fiqh needs medicine. There are many areas where medicine needs fiqh to regulate the practices, whether from the perspective of the provider or the patient. But this is an area where fiqh actually needs medicine because so Imam al-Kasani in Bada' al-Sana'a said something that I like very much because it makes some sense of the whole concept of invalidators of fasting. Because the concept of mufattirat or invalidators of fasting, people need to have like some sort of equation to use and to use basically consistently to make sense of that whole chapter. And so Imam al-Kasani said that everything that looks like the agreed upon invalidators in al-ma'na or al-mabna, كل ما شابه ذلك في المعنى أو المبنى, everything that looks like the agreed upon invalidators in ma'na, which is in substance, or mabna in form. In substance, meaning what? What would be like the invalidators of fasting in substance, but not in form? Of course, in substance and form, that would be the very invalidators of fasting that we all know, which is eating, drinking, intercourse, ejaculation. These would be the ones that are at the core of the invalidators of fasting. And then the disagreements over, whether you vomit intentionally or not intentionally, and it seems that inducing the vomiting would invalidate the fasting, although these things are controversial. But at the core of this would be eating and drinking and sex, including ejaculation. So what would be like that in meaning and not form? That would be, IV fluids, for instance. IV fluids or intravenous fluids will hydrate you, will keep you from getting thirsty, but it is not like eating in form. Certainly, Imam Ibn Hazm would be completely unhappy with this whole sort of discussion, because to him, that's nonsense. If you say that IV fluids would invalidate the fasting, that's nonsense, because there is no way that this would be called eating or drinking by any sane Arab during the time of the revelation. But if you apply qiyas, if you're part of the majority who would apply qiyas and extend the ruling through analogy, then that would be the equation. This IV fluids will be like eating or drinking in substance, but not in substance, but not in form. So what would be the opposite of this? The opposite of this is to swallow stones, for instance, pebbles, for instance. That's not like eating and drinking, because that will not hydrate you or nourish you, but it is in form, in shape, like eating. So that would also invalidate your fasting. So if you remember this equation, every time someone brings a question to you about mufattirat, is it like eating or drinking in form or substance or both? If it is like eating and drinking in any of these two or both of them, then it is an invalidator of fasting. So given that sort of foundation, we now discuss that different medical interventions and different medications and what would basically spoil your fasting or ruin your fasting or invalidate your fasting. So anything that is applied externally would not invalidate your fasting. Anything that is applied externally will not invalidate your fasting. Creams and ointments and things like that should not invalidate your fasting. eye drops will not invalidate your fasting. Is there a way that something can get, something can get into your internal cavity, which is al-jawf? That al-jawf is basically what makes the fuqaha concerned. So anything that would enter into your jawf would invalidate your fasting. Which jawf are they talking about? That's a very long story. But at the end of the day, they're talking about many cavities, the hollow interior. Yet, from our perspective, after the medical developments, we should limit this jawf that they're talking about to the GI tract, gastrointestinal tract, because the bladder, for instance, is a hollow interior. The uterus, for instance, is a cavity, and it is internal. And certainly, for some of them, if you get stabbed, your fasting is invalidated because the knife or the sword pierced your hollow interior. But that would not invalidate the fasting if we go by this equation that we discussed earlier. Anything that is like eating and drinking in form or in substance. So we want this to make sure that nothing is getting into your GI tract. But is there a possibility that eye drops and nose drops get into your GI tract? Yes, but an extremely trivial amount, which should not be legally consequential. And that is the position of Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami, the older and the bigger one, the International Islamic Fiqh Academy. Eye drops, nose drops, ear drops. Ear drops are extremely difficult to get into your hollow interior unless you have a perforated drum and you stick into it. Would be like what? Yeah, but the issue here is ear drops, eye drops, nose drops. All of this is fine. Does
the inhalers goes with the nose drops as well?
Okay.
Specifically for a lot of people, they have asthma in specific areas in America or in UK.
Okay, so the inhalers in particular, they deferred to the discussion when they had this discussion. They deferred to the discussion about inhalers. So we now have individual fatwa from different scholars who disagreed over the inhalers, because the International Islamic Fiqh Academy, when they had this discussion, they said that we would like to defer this to another meeting, and I don't think that they've ever discussed it afterwards collectively, but scholars from the Majma' and from outside have addressed this issue and they disagreed. Why did they disagree? Because the inhaler, there are some little particles that come out and go down, and they are meant to go down your trachea, your air tube, not your esophagus. Not the tube that leads to the stomach. It's the tube that leads to the lungs. But is it possible that very, tiny particles will make it to your esophagus? Of course, it is possible. But is this consequential? I don't think it should be consequential.
Yeah.
I really don't think it should be consequential. Because we make wudu 5 times a day, and the Prophet did not tell us to basically stop making madmada in Ramadan. And whatever is left in your mouth is more than, whatever is more than what you get through the nose drops or inhalers or eye drops or anything of that nature. So I think all of this would not invalidate your fasting. Now, also catheterization, urinary catheterization, any procedures that involve introducing anything into the female genital tract should not invalidate the fasting. anything that would introduce anything into the urinary tract should not invalidate the fasting. They defer to the discussion about things that sort of rectal administration of medications and fluids. So here also this would be an area of disagreement. If you're taking medicine rectally, that should not invalidate the fasting. Why? Because it is not like eating or drinking in form or in substance. Yes, it is getting to your GI tract, but it is not getting to your GI tract through your mouth. So we say it's like eating and drinking in form. And in substance, it's not like eating and drinking because it does not nourish or hydrate you, unless you're trying to hydrate yourself through this route, which is still possible. But it would be very awkward if someone actually did that. If the doctors are doing this for you, then simply break the fast and make up for it. The deen is yusr, alhamdulillah. And someone who's sick and needs medicine that will break, or a procedure or intervention that will break their fasting, it's easy, make up another day. So all of these things will not invalidate the fasting. The medical intervention that will invalidate the fasting is to give you IV fluids or total parenteral nutrition, so something that will hydrate you or nourish you, something that will hydrate you or nourish you through the IV, because it really defeats the purpose of fasting. Fasting induces hunger and thirst. And if you're on total parenteral nutrition, you will not be hungry or thirsty.
And that takes us to the licenses for iftar, actually, or the rukhsa for iftar. There is a specific qaida fiqhiyya or ruling here, because as we all know about the musafir, about the sick person, does it go specifically with a certain like a stage of pregnancy, for example, or any pregnant has to go with the can apply iftar on herself? Also, we get some people asking about like their students have iftar. So what is the ruling in here?
Okay, so basically, let's take them one by one. So the first one is anyone who is sick, his sickness will worsen. Fasting will worsen his sickness, or fasting will cause him hardship. Fasting will cause him hardship or will worsen his sickness. That person is exempt. Hardship does not have to be, close to death or anything. It's just hardship. Imam Ahmad was very lenient about this, and he would consider, that toothache is hardship. It's just hardship. So someone who's sick, their sickness will delay their recovery. Their fasting will delay their recovery or cause them any form of hardship. They are allowed to break their fast. That's as far as the sick person. As far as the pregnant woman, if the pregnant, they have there is a detailed discussion about whether she fears for herself or she fears for her baby, and if the kafara, if she fears for herself or if she fears for her baby. But the bottom line is that pregnant women are allowed to break their fasting. Pregnant and breastfeeding women are allowed to break their fasting. Al-Hamil and Al-Murda, they're both allowed to break their fasting. And then, do they need to make up? That's the question. Or can they pay the kafara, which is the expiation?
Yes.
Because that question also comes up. And according to the four mazahib, they do need to make up. There is a position that can be understood from a statement of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, where he said to a pregnant woman, "Anti mimman la yutiqunahu," you are one of those who cannot bear fasting, which he was inferring that she can expiate without making up. Expiate without making up. That statement or that position of Abdullah ibn Abbas was not taken up by any of the four madhahib. Therefore, those who believe that the agreement of the four madhahib should never be violated, they will certainly, and certainly it's certainly their right to believe that, they will certainly not take any other position. I believe that the agreement of the four madhahib should be heeded. We should be very careful about disagreeing with the agreement of the four madhahib or departing or deviating from the agreement of the four madhahib, but we should not limit the truth to the four madhahib in an absolute sense, because that would be saying that the agreement of the four madhahib takes the same power of consensus, and that is incorrect. There is no basis for such claim. So some of the contemporary scholars had posited that the position of Ibn Abbas may actually be upheld if women are getting, like pregnant 1 year after another, or recurrent pregnancies and breastfeeding, because honestly speaking, after having like 3 kids, just 3 kids, and breastfeeding for 2 years, say 1 year, not 2 years, but that's 1 year of pregnancy, 1 year of breastfeeding, multiply this by 3, you got 6 years to make, like you got 180 days, which could be a hardship. So scholars like Sheikh Al-Qaradawi rahimahullah, Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah, Sheikh Sayyid Sabiq rahimahullah, Sheikh Atiyah Saqr also rahimahullah mentioned this as a possible interpretation, or a possible position, excusable position, sa'ir position. So there were many like tier one scholars, rasikhin, who felt that this position can be upheld. And if you have a position outside of the four madhahib, you need some conditions to use it. Should be upheld by mujtahid/mujtahideen. It should have some foundation, some basis, and it should enjoy some widespread acceptance. That's not the majority of people necessarily, but some widespread acceptance. And I think this position enjoys all 3 conditions, or fulfills all 3 conditions. So in this case, I would say that they don't need to make up, but they can expiate. And so that's the pregnant woman and the breastfeeding woman. Yes.
Yeah, and that goes with any chronic disease as well. Like, for example, those people, they have
chronic disease for sure. Yes, that goes for chronic disease that, where recovery is not expected or hoped. Yes, of course. Yes.
Is there any fiqh ruling about an age of a person that he can have iftar, and on the same time he doesn't make up that iftar anymore?
And then fiqh ruling about the age of a person to...
Yeah. Is there anything like this about the age itself, or
like old age, like what is the cutoff for old age? No, there is nothing to specify a particular age. It's a matter of capacity.
MashaAllah. Okay. Jump to another maybe questions from here. Jazakumullah khairan, dear sheikhs, for the company and for inviting the circle. Yeah, mashallah, Sister Farzana is saying it's very beneficial for her and for others, mashallah. Any questions from any of our brothers? We have Imam Wajid. He says, Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh. I've been asked, I think we covered this, but maybe we just take his question as well, inshallah, to be specified about what he's asking. The question is, if a person is fasting and they use a high-pressured bidet after answering the call of nature and the water enters into their body, does this break the fast?
No, they take what?
Like they use the water pressure bidet.
Oh, the bidet. Okay, and water enters inside.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's not a problem. It's like
Not breaking the fast.
Yeah. No, it shouldn't break the fasting,
Sheikh, I got a question before about a person that his kids are doing.
But I do understand where he's coming from, because that is water getting into the GI tract. But that is not basically intended, and that's a small amount and not intended. So, but I do get his point. It's not like, yeah, I understand. Yes, go ahead.
Sheikh, I got a question before about a person that he's asking about his kids participating in some sports activity at a school. And he asked specifically about this. One of his kids was doing swimming. And the other person, he was like a football team or soccer ball team. And he said that they go dehydrated. Is it an excuse for them to break their fast?
No, I would not. No, I don't think that this is an excuse, because we can't open no, this would be a door that basically devastates the objectives of the Sharia in this regard. So we can't open it this much. The little room that we have is for, because the little room that we have, particularly in the Hanbali madhab, not in the other madhab, but the Hanbali madhab is the more lenient with regard to livelihood. Like if your livelihood will be affected or harmed, like someone who works, like some type of hard labor, builders and stuff like that. And if you're unable to fast, and fasting will affect your livelihood, then Imam Ahmad will allow the person to break their fasting if it affects their livelihood. Now, can we extend this to say that a student that is having a crucial exam, like an important exam, and he usually gets headaches, and he usually loses focus and concentration when he fasts, and so on and so forth, but he's having this crucial exam, can we say that this would apply? Perhaps yes, because that would affect his livelihood, potentially. It's not affecting his livelihood now, immediately, but it is affecting his livelihood potentially. So, yes. So many of the contemporary scholars have allowed students in this case. I personally advise, and I have advised my kids to, and I've always advised them, and they've always done this, and they didn't find the problem if the exam is at 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock. It's still possible to have a good suhoor and to be in good shape by the time you get, So we have to be really careful, and we have to, tell people that there is room, but be conscious of God and do your best and be careful, because, Allah knows our interior and exterior. So we're not gonna, we should not be seeking loopholes or shortcuts. We should be very conscious of God when we take these concessions.
In few words, put religion as a loyalty for yourself and prepare yourself for the siyam.
Yes, absolutely.
Jazakumullah khairan. Sheikhna, any questions about this point? Mashaykhna? Doctors? Okay, we see no questions about this point. So inshallah, we'll jump to the last point that we intend to discuss in this workshop or webinar about the end of life. Sheikhna.
Okay, so the discussion of the end of life, just like the discussion of the beginning of life, is very pertinent and very relevant, because you as an imam must be familiar that most of the questions that pertain to medicine either pertain to the end of life or the beginning of life. And most of the times, most of the questions that I get personally pertain to the end of life. Because when can we remove life support? The idea of life support itself is a new idea, right? Like they didn't have this. They didn't have to discuss this. Our earlier scholars did not have to discuss this, but there are important foundational principles that we have to be familiar with, to be clear on before we have this discussion. What is the ruling of tadawi to begin with? What is the ruling of seeking medical treatment to begin with? According to the four imams, according to the four madhahib, seeking medical treatment is recommended. And Imam Ahmad went as far, in his basically de-stressing the importance of medical treatment to saying that it is khilaf al-awla. It's suboptimal. To seek medical treatment is suboptimal, because he felt that if you have tawakkul and all of the reports from Abu Bakr, from Abu Darda, from other Sahaba concerning their forsaking medical treatment and having tawakkul, Imam Ahmad felt that it is better to have tawakkul and not to seek medical treatment. Now, so that is the position of the four imams. There are a few Shafi'is and Hanbalis who said that medical treatment is obligatory in certain cases, but that's not the mu'tamad of the madhahib. This is important for us to conceptualize at the beginning of this discussion, because we have to know where we're coming from. And then if we have to make adaptations to our new reality, at least we should understand that as Muslims, we're not really Catholic. We're Muslim. So we don't have the same value system when it comes to these issues. We have a different value system. Now, the contemporary scholars, since medicine during those times was different from medicine during our times, the contemporary scholars made some adaptations here. And according to the International Islamic Fiqh Academy, seeking medical treatment would be obligatory in 4 conditions. So emergency, to stop the bleeding. Safe medicine for harmful disease that will cause infirmity or handicap, or that will cause you to be a burden on your family. And diseases that are contagious, that will cause harm to the community if they are left untreated. So these are the conditions here of obligation. So it would be obligatory to go to the doctor and to take your medicine if the medicine is safe, or at least is safer than the disease, and the disease is harmful. So someone who's having flu, does he have to take Tamiflu in Islam? No, because it's not expected that the harm really is that great, and Tamiflu is not known to be that effective. Someone who has diabetes, is he required to take insulin in Islam? and it is very hard to say this, and I have to seek Allah's forgiveness, because this is in our understanding, because in Islam, in the sight of God, who can make that, determination definitively? But in our understanding, yes, someone is required to take insulin, because if you have diabetes, insulin is safe and has been used for more than half a century, more than 70 years. Diabetes can kill you in a few months if you don't take insulin. Type 1 diabetes, at least. And there is no reason for us to subject yourself to this harm. So you don't need to subject yourself to this harm. Islam says, La darar wa darar. There should be no harm or reciprocation of harm. So there is no harm or reciprocation of harm is the basis of this chapter of Tadawi. The Prophet certainly said, Tadawa ibad Allah. فإن الله لم ينزل داء إلا أنزل معه شفاء إلا السام. So the Prophet certainly said, seek medicine, O servants of Allah, for Allah had not brought down a disease except that He brought down the cure with it. عرفه من عرفه وجهله من جهله. Whoever knows it knows it. Whoever doesn't. So that's actually encouragement to go out and discover treatments, because we are being told by the Prophet ﷺ that every disease has a cure. So that should stimulate us, that should motivate us. We should have been the people to discover all of the new medications and in the last 1400 years. But anyway, we're not. At least in the last 500 years, we're not. But what I wanted to say is that we have this hadith which shows that probably Imam Ahmad was not, I'm Hanbali, he's my Imam, but in all fairness, probably the position of Imam Ahmad may have not been, from a Sufi perspective, it is. But from a fiqh perspective, it may have not been the best position. Because there is at least encouragement here coming from the Prophet ﷺ to seek treatment. And when medicine is safe and the benefit of medicine is almost definitive, because you could see penicillin working on the bacteria and killing them. You can see it with your eyes, in a medium. So it's not based on conjecture like it was 400 or 500 years ago. So we have to, but now in this, we have to limit the obligation to those scenarios. You have harmful disease, safe medicine, you want to stop, the bleeding in an emergency situation, you have a contagious disease, and you want to curtail the spread of the disease. These are the conditions where seeking medical treatment is obligatory. This was an important introduction, because now we will come to someone who has multiple organ failure on life support and basically is not expected to get better. And sometimes you could be on life support for years. What would be the Islamic ruling here? Should all of these sick people, and think about it also from a collective, a communal perspective, can our healthcare system, can the healthcare system in Egypt afford to keep all those sick people on life support? No. So I'm looking at it from an individual perspective. I had surgery where they took my spleen out. I was in a car accident, and they had to basically fly me to a tertiary care center. I had surgery. They took my spleen out, and after the surgery, I was under-sedated, a little bit under-sedated, and I had this tube stuck down my throat, And it was the most horrific experience I have ever been through. You know, you can't talk, you can't do anything. You have this tube stuck down your throat and you're feeling, you know, awful. So just keep in mind, you know, if you have a loved one, like an older mom or dad, keep in mind that keeping them on life support for months, there may be some degree of awareness that they have, and it's really unmerciful to them. If the condition is determined to be irreversible, because when we say hopeless, someone can say, you know, who are you? Are you God? Of course not. But within al-asbab al-bashar, at the end of the day, you're making your assessment within, you know, al-asbab allati bayna aydina, yani, like our medicine, it does not work for this. The multiple organ failure, you know, you have 3 experts, and Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami requires 3 experts in these cases, just to add some layer of assurance that we're making the right decision, because it's a huge decision. Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami would require 3 experts. So I would say that since medical treatment is not obligatory in all cases, removal of life support is permissible if the disease is deemed irreversible by 3 experts. And usually in medicine, these decisions are never done by one physician. You would have like an army of physicians present to make that decision. So that would be the bottom line with regard to the removal of life support. If the disease is irreversible, the patient cannot resume a dignified life. That dignified life would be characterized, what is life characterized by? In Ta'rifat and Ta'rif and all of these books of fiqh definitions, you know, it is a state that distinguishes the animate object from an inanimate object, and it is qualified by 2 important qualifications, ilm and irada. Ilm signifies input. Irada signifies output. So if there is no input or output at all, then that is not life, even if your tissues are still alive. But this is not life to be kept or to be preserved. Now we have different issues, because we have brain death, we have persistent vegetative state, we have coma, and we have none of the above, but irreversible hopeless disease. Irreversible hopeless disease. When it comes to brain death, at least we have decisions from the 2 majama that life support can be removed. And the death will be announced when? After the heart stops.
Mm-hmm.
So our majama, so is brain death equal to death in our contemporary legal tradition? No. In some other religious communities and in the secular traditions, brain death equals death. In our book, according to the majority position of our scholars, brain death does not equal death. But brain death would allow you to remove life support. And once the heart stops, the person is basically declared dead. So practically speaking, what's the difference here? There are some differences. Like if someone from your family dies in, those few minutes between the removal of life support and the heart stopping, who inherits who? Who died first? It would make like some practical differences, but very few and very, sort of eccentric. So that is brain death. Short of brain death, you have the persistent vegetative state and coma. And short of these, you have the irreversible disease. You're still on life support, but you have an irreversible disease. So to bring them all under one umbrella, if the condition is irreversible, treatment is not required. If the condition is irreversible, treatment is not required. So is there like some controversy concerning what constitutes treatment? Yes, there is. So what is treatment? And is feeding through the gastrostomy tube or feeding through TPN, total parenteral nutrition, is that a form of treatment or that is feeding? And you cannot keep food from a sick person. Is life support in itself? According to some people, life support is delivering air to your lungs that is like feeding also. So for some people, all of this is not medical intervention. This is basically feeding, given a drink, hydrating, and given air, and you can't basically withhold that from a living being. How cruel are you? The problem is you could keep them like this for years on life support. And so this is a burden on the community. And this is most importantly, torture for the patient, which if the patient has any level of awareness of their condition, you could imagine how much pain they are going through. And it is also a burden on their family, a huge burden on their family. So why are we forcing, the continuation of this? This is where it is important, our introduction, our earlier discussion was important. Is seeking treatment in Islam obligatory by default? No, it was not. We said it became obligatory in certain conditions based on the principle of la darar wa la dirar, when medical interventions became more advanced. So now we have medicine like insulin, yet you are required. We have interventions that save the lives. These are required. We have interventions that curtail the spread of disease. This would be required. But otherwise, keeping a patient with irreversible disease on life support, getting food through a gastrostomy tube, getting air through a endotracheal tube, I don't think that this is the concept of dignified life in Islam. So, and as I said, we're not Catholic, which means that there is a difference in the value system and in the priorities. We value life extremely, but we're not that afraid of death, because for us, it is not extinction. It is not vanishing. It's just a new phase, which hopefully will be better.
Jazakumullah khairan, Doctor. I may conclude with a question, if there is no questions now in regard to this point. this is not for you as a faqih, but as a doctor. What is there like a specific ruling about removing life support at hospitals in here?
No, it's not that there is specific ruling. Like in the case of coma, for instance, we would give like coma after a car accident. They, you know, so coma after a heart attack without trauma, without car accident or anything like that. So they would give 3 months to that, 3 to 6 months. Coma after car accident, they would give 6 to 12 months on life support. In most of the places, they would give you a year on life support. So I don't think that, you know, in the medical community, people are reckless about this, honestly speaking.
And do they take like the family opinion about this, or this is a hospital decision?
No, of course they involve the family in this decision. They always involve the family in this decision.
Okay.
They actually involve the family and they involve the clergy. You know, the clergy based on the family's request, and of course, your clergy, not like, you know.
Yeah, it depends. Depend on the faith and religion, of course.
Yeah.
Any questions for our mashayikh here? Yeah, Sheikh Musa.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa barakatuh.
Really informative. We learn a lot, and it was a need of our time that we needed to be revisited this area, contemporary fiqh in this ruling area. Sheikh, a couple questions I have in this regard as you are talking about. Yes, most of the issues that you discussed has pertaining to the American situation. What about sometimes we have relatives overseas, and some musallis come, their relatives overseas are in situation where they're hospitalized and they are the only one who's providing financial aid from here. And those hospitals may not be as sincere towards the treatment of the patient, but they're trying to get the money as much as they can before this patient expires. So they give false hope or mislead family members that this treatment can really cure their loved one, and they ended up giving all their lifetime savings. And I have had a number of situations where parents have literally lost even their own homes. They sold homes and only to bring the dead bodies home after 15 days or 70 days. And lo and behold, physicians, doctors, and others knew this patient was never recovered from the situation, but they were just trying to milk from the condition that they're in. So what is the ruling here? Should we put every single thing on it? Even if the person does not have any mal, should we give sadaqah and zakat for the treatment and leave the family members behind in financial crisis?
No, I think that consulting, you know, getting a second opinion and a third opinion, I think 3 experts should be the expertise of 3 experts should be sought, and if they agree that the condition is irreversible, then in this case the medical intervention would be futile, and I wouldn't waste the resources of the family or the community on a futile endeavor. Keep in mind, we're not God, but we're stopping our medical intervention. If God decreed that this person will live, the person does not need our medical intervention.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very insightful.
There was one more case here in America, person who worked in the military, very with strong will, have wrote in his will that I don't want to be on the life support or anything like that, meaning if the life is not of the quality, I don't want to live, let me just go. And decision was being made by the family members based on his, but he did not meet the criteria, he did not have the disease that is irreversible, but it will compromise his quality of life, which means that he became the wheelchair bound. He was paralyzed. With aggressive therapy, he's recovering very good now, mashallah, even coming to the salah. But family was ready to let him go. At that time, we as community and the leaders had to intervene and said that, no, you cannot rule this. The person has a chance of survival and have a quality of life, but not as what he was having or expected. Till this day, the family have cut ties with the imam because they did not honor their father's wish, and the father is now wheelchair bound. Was that the right ruling or bad?
Okay, so what I was talking about is irreversible cases, but the idea here of someone refusing medical treatment, we want to always honor sort of choice here, like freedom of choice. And someone refusing medical treatment, because we have like close to a consensus of the Sahaba that they did not contest when other Sahaba refused the medical treatment. So if the medical intervention is not a simple stopping of bleeding, or not basically a safe medicine that will cure a harmful disease, we want to give the patient the right to decide whether they want to seek treatment or not. I do not want us as Muslims to force a cancer patient to take chemotherapy for 2 years because there is a chance of survival. He should be able to make that decision for himself or herself. He should be able to make that decision, whether he wants to take chemotherapy or not.
Interesting, very interesting. I see. So if somebody leaves the will that I don't want to be taken to the hospital, if something were to happen, just let me deal with it. If I stay, if I go, let me just go.
Seeking medical treatment, unless it is one of these conditions, emergency, life-saving intervention, where you basically, even DNR would be still allowable in Islam in many cases, but or do not resuscitate would be still allowable in Islam in many cases. But you have someone who underwent like some trauma or something happened, they had a heart attack, you shock them, they come back to life. That would be required to do. It's a life-saving intervention. And if, like I said, the example of insulin also, that would be required. But chemotherapy, a medicine that is harmful, burdensome, taxing, costly, you know, if I come from the position that, because I have to first identify my default. Where is the default? The default is that the 4 imams and the 4 madhahib said that seeking medical treatment is preferred, except for Imam Ahmad. But, you know, you get the point. That is my default. Now, to force other than the default on people, I have to legitimize this. And to force obligation on the people, I have to legitimize this. I can easily legitimize this by saying, La darar wa la dirar. You are subjecting yourself to permanent infirmity or handicap or to death by refusing to take a safe medicine. You are refusing, you know, you're not letting the doctor stop your bleeding or shock you, I guess, but if you're aware, then, which is a life-saving intervention. But I would not basically make it an obligation on people to seek treatment in scenarios where things are gray. It's their decision. It's up to them.
Jazakallah khair. quick question going back to the same thing. I understand that by refusing to taking the medication, you may put yourself in a position that you would become handicapped or something. But the person that I was talking about, he was a very strong, independent man, did not want it to be dependent even on his children to wheelchair him. He said that if I'm not able to walk on my 2 feet, I'd rather go. And now, lo and behold, after the treatment, he is recovering, but wheelchair bound for some time. He might even eventually walk because he's showing great response towards the aggressive therapy that is being done. His idea was wanting to leave because he just did not want to be dependent on
What was the medical intervention? The idea here is, what was the medical intervention that was needed for him to survive? What was the medical intervention? I mean, if the medical intervention was basically to keep him on life support for 6 months and he did not want this, then we should not have forced this on him. If the medical intervention that was required to make him survive was to stop the bleeding, yes, we will stop the bleeding, whether he likes it or not.
Okay. The fact that he's wheelchair bound today, that's the only problem, that the children says, our dad did not want it to be wheelchair bound. His spirit and ego is hurt. He should have been let go in peace as he was walking and talking. The father is enjoying coming to the salah and everything. The children are not happy because they have to work for him.
So the man who did not want to live is now happy that he's alive?
Yes, enjoying the grandchildren. His children are married and seeing the life. But the children are unhappy because they think that daddy never wanted to be in the wheelchair.
That's a complicated story.
That's what I'm saying. So because of that reason, if anybody want to say that I rather live while I'm healthy, if I need to go, let me go, don't let me be wheelchair bound. Should we honor that wish?
Yes, I think that wish should be honored, except if we're having a life-saving medical intervention, an emergency life-saving medical intervention. No one will honor that wish. The doctors in the hospitals will not honor that wish, except if there is a DNR signed and the person, the DNR would be discussed with people that are having certain medical conditions and certain irreversible conditions. But although this is personal, I'll tell you this. All my children know that if I need to be on life support, let me go. I am not, it is not, please let me go. And if they don't, please remind them.
Any other questions, because we're running out of time now? Okay, مشايخنا جزاكم الله.
We will conclude by a kalima من الشيخ جمال.
Yeah, Sheikh, I was about to ask Sheikh Jamal now to do the same, wallah. Please, Sheikhna. You're muted, Sheikh. Sheikhna, you are muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
اللهم إنك تعلم أن هذه القلوب قد اجتمعت على محبتك وتوحدت على دعوتك وتعاهدت على نصرة شريعتك، فوثق اللهم رابطتها وأدم مدها واهدها سبلها واملأها بنورك الذي لا يخبو، واشرح صدورها بفيض الإيمان بك وجميل التوكل عليك، وأحيها بمعرفتك وأمتها على الشهادة في سبيلك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Beautiful voice, Sheikh. We've been longing to hear your voice. These years are trained, used to hearing your voice. حياك الله يا شيخ.
بارك الله فيكم جميعا، استفدنا كثيرا، وربنا يجزي أخونا الحبيب الدكتور حاتم وجميع المنظمين ومدير الجلسة.
Yeah, and Sheikhna, if you allow me, on behalf of NAIF, I would love to thank Dr. Hatem Al-Haj, our faqih here, and mashallah, the honor increased and doubled when we had when we have you, Sheikh Jamal, with us here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make benefit from your ilm all the time. Allahumma ameen. And in conclusion, and I believe and I hope that this webinar has been informative and beneficial for all of us. We have discussed some topics here related to healthcare, medicine in general, and related to fasting. And I hope that our imams and healthcare personnel who participated here gain some new insights and perspectives. Inshallah, we will look forward to seeing everyone in the upcoming workshops, webinars, and training sessions with North American Imam Federation. And until then, we concluded with the dua, the beautiful dua from our Sheikh Jamal. So we don't need to do any more du'as except wishing you all safety of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the blessings.
One notice, I do not claim to be the author of this dua. This is something I learned as a young man, maybe in the high school, and never departed from my memory.
It's
just for the sake of honesty.
It's a beautiful dua, wallahi, Sheikh, and it's an honor to get it from you too, wallahi. Jazakumullah khairan. Dr. Hatem Al-Haj, Jazakumullah khairan for participating in this. As mentioned, wallahi, that was very informative. I myself, I filled about 3-4 papers now, pages now, just comments. So I need to go back for the video to get all of the insight that you shared here. And inshallah, also we're going to put it on the Facebook page. The website is going to be launched maybe in less than a month from now. So all of these videos are going to be uploaded on this. Jazakumullahu khairan all, and thanks for everyone that who participated in this webinar today. Jazakumullahu khairan.